Okay, it looks like we have all our media guests here, so we're going to get started. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here virtually today. I'm Matthew Sukram, the communications coordinator for MP Anthony Rota's office in North Bay. And this is a big announcement for several municipalities in Northern Ontario. And I thank our media members for joining us to cover today's event. We will be hearing from members of parliament whose ridings will benefit from today's announcement, as well as mayors of two of the municipalities and representatives from the companies who filed the applications, just to kind of give you a snapshot of who will be speaking this morning. As well, we will have time once the speeches wrap up to have some questions for our media guests. We'll just have you use the raised hand function and our moderator will unmute you. I'm going to turn things over now to Nipissing MP Anthony Rota to say a few welcoming remarks. Anthony.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning. Bonjour, Annie. Bonjour. I'm pleased to be here for this exciting announcement. The rural communities, including many here in Northern Ontario, not having access to for many rural communities not having access to reliable internet has been an impact that really has been accentuated by the pandemic. And as member of Parliament for Nipissing-Temiskaming, I'm thrilled that today's announcement will no longer limit people in accessing the services they need because of a lack of broadband connectivity. Cela aidera également toutes les personnes touchées à accéder aux possibilités de travailler à distance et accéder les dernières offres d'emploi. Nous savons tous que l'accès à l'Internet haute vitesse de haute qualité est essentiel dans notre monde qui devient de plus en plus numérique et en ligne. I want to take this opportunity to give thanks to three very special people who are here with us this morning. First off, I want to start with Susan Church, who tirelessly pushes for internet access throughout the region and has been here with us as we kept pushing hard to make sure that today can take place. The second person I want to thank, of course, is the mayor of East Ferris, Pauline Rochefort. And I think we first started talking about this day when she was, I think it was the day after she got elected as mayor. And she's been pushing and working hard. And Pauline, merci de ton travail acharné. And of course, I want to include Minister Mariam Monsef, who understands rural ridings and was there with us right from the first day. And that I mentioned this project to her, and she's been on board, and she wants to see connectivity happen throughout Canada, and especially in rural areas that all of us can really relate to. So this is a great announcement, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be here virtually and introduce my good friend and colleague and member of Parliament for Nickel Belt and newly appointed Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources. Here's Mark Sene. Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you, MP Rota. Thank you, my good friend Anthony, for all the work that you do. Thank you for the introductions. Also, too, I want to say bonjour, Annie, to everyone that's gathered here virtually. This is such an exciting day. I'll start off by land acknowledgement. We're on the lands located traditional territory of the unceded Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. With the Atigimashing, where I'm located, Wanapete First Nations, Atigimashing, Anishnawbek, and also want to thank the First Nations in Nipissing, Temagami, that are part of MP Rota's riding, and Sagamok, First Nations, that is part of the announcement today. Also, to my colleague Anthony, that is present today, it's always a pleasure working with you and my colleague Paul Lefebvre. Both of you work really hard for your areas, and I know from day one, since you've been elected, you brought high-speed internet to the forefront of Mary Monsef, a cabinet, our predecessors, and many in caucus to push to get more high-speed internet. And also I want to thank Matthew, Anthony Rota's staff for coordinating this event. So as Anthony mentioned, we have a lot of special guests today, but I want to take the opportunity also with the local mayors. And we have several councillors online too today for this special announcement. And like Pauline Rochefort from the mayor of East Ferris, I also want to thank Nancy Wirtz from Killarney as a mayor and councillor. Those were the very first call I received from Nancy was about internet in 2015. a few days after I was elected, and keep pushing how important it is for Killarney, and we know for the entire region. So I want to also just make sure, Nancy and Pauline, that you thank all the councillors on our behalf. People don't realize how important it is dealing with municipal councillors, and also the feedback that you provide to us as MPs. And obviously, since being elected, infrastructure, broadband has always been priorities in Killarney, Nickel Belt, Sudbury, Nipissing, Algoma regions, and all across Northern Ontario. So keep pushing that, working closely, and really important to have municipal councillors and mayors keep advocating for your areas. You're the first line of defense when it comes to municipalities. And also I want to thank the Sagamok First Nations. Today we'll be announcing funding today that will benefit Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing region, and recognizing the Treaty 9 territory and the traditional territory of the Cree. So that's really important that we do that today. Also, I'll take the opportunity to thank the private sector for your investments that you've made in broadband. Companies like Net Spectrum for East Ferris and Redbridge, Vianet Internet Solutions for Killarney, and also Bell Canada for Sagamok First Nations. I want to thank the private sector for taking the time and also your financial contributions to these projects. We often don't talk about that, but it's the investments that are needed linked to government investments in rural Canada and Northern Ontario, but also we need private sector dollars to make these types of announcements that we're announcing today possibility. And last but not least, as Anthony mentioned, Susan Church, Blue Sky, you've been, advocating for many decades now for broadband internet all over Northern Ontario. And we just made an announcement not too long ago for the Winnipeg First Nations on the broadband projects in Sudbury. And that was one of the first, it was the first approved UBF project, rapid response project in Northern Ontario, right here, so in Nickel Belt, Greater Sudbury. So c'est vraiment important lorsqu'on regarde les investissements, puis aussi on regarde le ministre Monsef, l'importance qu'il apporte ici au niveau des députés, les maires, les conseillers et les entreprises du secteur privé pour faire certain que nos communautés sont branchées avec l'Internet à haute vitesse. On parle des écoles, on parle des entreprises et on parle des organisations pour se brancher pour le développement économique. So I'm saying all these thank yous, and I know that, we will be acknowledging some of the individuals, but it's really important that when we look at the federal government taking a leadership role and working together with partners like the municipalities and the private sector to make these types of announcements possible. So ever since we've launched the Universal Broadband Fund, we knew that good things will be happening in Nipissing, Greater Sudbury, Nickel Belt, Algoma areas all across Northern Ontario. We know for a fact underserviced areas, accessibility, reliability, and affordable broadband is an issue. So that's why today, getting to the announcements today, I'm really, it's a pleasure for me to be with my colleague Paul Lefebvre and Anthony Rhoda today on behalf of the Minister of Women, Gender Equality, and Rural Economic Development, Marion Monsef, to announce by the federal government an investment of over $2 million of funding for Vianet, Blue Sky Net with Net Spectrum, and Bell Canada. And this is to bring high-speed internet to residents of Killarney, East Ferris, Redbridge, Sagamok, Anishnawbek First Nations. So this is a wonderful announcement, and we know that getting high-quality internet is essential in this digital world. And when we look at the pandemic, has really forced us to really accelerate that investment to make sure that we look at our workplaces, we look at our friends and families, and we stay connected with our loved ones. So the reality of the high-speed internet, when we look at healthcare, schools, and businesses, is so important. And that's why when we launched as a government in November 2020, the Universal Broadband Fund of $1.75 billion investment to help connect Canadians. And this is an integral part of the Universal Broadband Fund. Today's announcement with a rapid response stream that looks at $150 million for shovel-ready projects that will bring high-speed internet to communities over the next few months. And that's never been seen before as a government outlining these funds so quickly. And I really want to take the time to thank Minister Monsef and Cabinet for listening to the entire Northern Ontario caucus that has really pushed to have some of these short-term funding for some of the small municipalities. So when we talk about the UBF, it's a rapid response stream, and it's ready to go projects that receive faster approval. The Winnipeg First Nations got approved in, I believe, 4 weeks, unheard of. I want to thank the staff at the Minister's office for their rapid response, and ISED for really making these projects turn over really quickly. So when we look at connecting Canadians, we made our commitment as a federal government to provide the leadership to connect all Canadians by 2030, but that would be the hard to service areas, but also 98% of all Canadians will be connected by 2026. And that's a commitment we've made. And you heard this from governments in the past, but we've actually put money attached to it. We've put money dedicated to it. And in connecting 98% of Canadians by 2026 is going to become a reality. So thank you, Blue Sky Net. Thank you, Net Spectrum, Vianet, and Bell Canada, and all the 4 proponents this morning for this announcement. It's really a partnership that will look at connecting over 1,200 homes in the area. Alors, merci beaucoup d'être ici. C'est vraiment important qu'on continue à développer l'Internet. Et nous allons regarder un budget fédéral le 19 avril qui va regarder à des investissements dans nos communautés rurales partout dans l'Ontario et partout au Canada. So when we look at shovel-ready projects, I want to encourage all municipalities. I want to encourage the private sector to make sure you contact your local MPs to make sure that we bring these projects forward. Alors, thank you so much for being here. Merci. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you, MP Surrey. I would now like to invite MP for Sudbury, Paul Lefebvre, to say a few words.
Thank you, Matthew. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très heureux d'être ici avec mon collègue Marc Serré et Anthony pour cette annonce très importante. It's always a pleasure to join Mark and Anthony for these special announcements. As you can see, Sudbury is not part of this, and that's fine with me. And I know that's fine with you as well. But the reason why I'm here is really just to, again, like Mark was saying, thank all the municipalities to certainly advocate for broadband funding. It's been certainly, Anthony, Mark, and I, it's been a priority of ours since 2015, so we were elected. We meet on a weekly basis as a Northern Ontario caucus. And one of the first things we kept advocating for over the years with the ministers has been broadband funding for rural areas. We know how critical this is. C'est tellement important d'avoir accès à l'Internet haute vitesse pour nos communautés, pour nos entreprises, et pour nos familles. So I really want to take this opportunity to really, again, thank Mark and Anthony for their leadership on this file. Their voices were heard loud and clear. These fundings don't happen naturally. It happens because of advocacy from the ground up, from the small communities, get to your MPs, and your MPs being your voice in Ottawa. And that's why the amount of funding that has been allocated to these projects is unprecedented. It's historic. At the same time, we realize that connectivity is just as important as our roads, because it's our lives. Today, that's how we got together. That's has allowed the economy to continue. So yes, the pandemic has really shown a light on the importance of this infrastructure. And as Mark was saying, Minister Monsef realizes that. She's been an advocate, tireless advocate for us. So the funding that we're able to bring to Northern Ontario is key. And this is a very exciting day for all of us in Northern Ontario, because these are some projects, there's a lot more to come, and because of your advocacy, et ensemble, on y arrive, et puis donc c'est très excitant. Donc je suis très heureux d'être ici, de partager cette annonce avec vous autres et l'enthousiasme pour appuyer le financement pour ce genre de projet. Donc félicitations tout le monde, et puis bravo et continuez. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, and continue your advocacy. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, MP Lefebvre. I would now like to invite the Mayor of Killarney, Nancy Wirtz, to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us on the call today. Very excited about this announcement. We're really excited that Vianet is receiving this funding for the project in Killarney. And we just want to acknowledge and recognize our appreciation for the government for prioritizing rural and remote communities like Killarney to get this access to improved broadband, as the other speakers have mentioned, how important this is in all communities and how all that has been highlighted in the pandemic. This funding will really mean a lot, I think, in the village area of Killarney, as it's going to benefit our business owners to help them improve their operations and find efficiencies and find maybe new ways to engage with their clients. And also our residents, obviously, in their day-to-day lives, and how we conduct business today is mostly through internet-based services. But one of the things I think is sort of going to be new for us as the world has shifted to a culture of a home-based workforce, which I think will be permanent in a lot of cases, is that it's going to create some new employment opportunities for our residents. And excuse me, having that new connectivity is going to make us eligible to participate in some of those new opportunities that will be out there. So, on behalf of council and myself, we really wanted to thank Vianet for taking the lead on this project and taking an interest in our community, and also MP Serre for all of his hard work and pushing this agenda forward, and always keeping in touch with us on the funding that's available and moving this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wertz. I would now like to invite the Mayor of East Ferris, Pauline Rochefort, to say a few words.
C'est bon? Oui? Bien, bonjour tout le monde, et puis ça me fait un grand plaisir d'être présente ici ce matin avec vous tous. Ma grande inquiétude ce matin, c'est que mon Internet va manquer parce que des grands vents. Alors, ça démontre l'importance de cette annonce ce matin. On behalf of the municipality of East Ferris, I thank the Government of Canada, and in particular, our Member of Parliament, Monsieur Anthony Rhoda. You're quite correct. Your colleagues have spoken of how hard you work on our behalf. And we know in particular on this file, Monsieur Rhoda, it has been one of your priorities. And so we have felt that, and we appreciate very much your hard work. On reconnaît aussi le travail de vos collègues avec le caucus du Parti libéral du Nord de l'Ontario. Monsieur Serré, Monsieur Lefebvre, votre présence aujourd'hui, c'est formidable. And we also recognize Minister Monsef. Mr. Rhoda spoke to us, our deputy spoke to us right from the beginning of the important role of Madame Monsef and how she was listening to the concerns of Northern Ontario. So that's very much appreciated to know that it, as was described, it went all up to the highest echelon. And so improving access to the internet is and has been a priority for East Ferris. And so today's announcement is for us just another step forward on this critical journey. And so, yes, we are very fortunate, as has been mentioned, to work with partners. Susan Church at Blue Sky Net, she is a wonderful person to work with. We appreciate all of her efforts. And as well, Spectrum Telecom Group, this is a private sector company, first class. They have been at the forefront there to help us here in East Ferris. We tremendously appreciate their involvement. And so it's a very special thank you for their assistance in moving this project forward. Certainly for us in East Ferris, we see this announcement building on an earlier one that was done this year that involved Blue Sky Net and Spectrum Telecom and the township of Chisholm. I say that because here in the Greater Nipissing, we've worked together as municipalities in advocating for improved internet for our area. And so we are confident that these announcements in Chisholm and today in East Ferris are steps in the announcement to come for our Greater Nipissing area. So merci encore beaucoup ce matin, puis Matthew for organizing this call.
Thank you, Mayor Rochefort. I would now like to invite the representative of Blue Sky Net, Susan Church, to say a few words.
Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. And I certainly echo the comments of all of our members of Parliament. I remember probably 2 years ago now getting a call from both Anthony and from Mark saying, do you have any shovel-ready projects? And it's like, do I have projects? and Mark is right. It makes me feel really old to know I have been doing this for decades. But I've been doing it for decades because I'm so passionate about the fact that we all need to work together to make this happen. And, you know, I just want to take a second right now to thank another federal friend of ours, and that is FedNor, and the fact that they continue to support the work of Blue Sky Economic Growth Corporation, or Blue Sky Net as we're better known, and they continue to believe that to have us help with this initiative across Northern Ontario. We're just so grateful to them for their contribution. And again, that comes from the support that we get from our members of parliament for helping them help us to keep doing this. 40% of Northern Ontario still does not have access to 50 by 10. Announcements like today's are such a big step towards fixing that. And I truly believe right now it's Northern Ontario's turn. I think we're being recognized. It's time that we're recognized, and we couldn't do it without the support of Minister Monsef and the members of parliament that have really been pushing for our communities. East Ferris, Redbridge, Killarney, Sagamok First Nation are all going to be better for today's announcement. And again, I appreciate it so very much. The boots on the ground, the folks who live in these communities have been effortless in their performance in helping us bring this to fruition. They write letters, they talk to us, they talk to their members of parliament, and we are very grateful for the advocacy of everyone from the folks that live in these communities right up to the minister's office. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Matt, for the opportunity to say a few words today.
Thank you, Susan. I would now like to invite the representative of Vianet, Brian McCullough, to say a few words.
Thank you, Matthew. We're really excited to be here today in these announcements of all these projects. And as Susan said, and I've heard it earlier, one company can't do it all. And it's nice to see the other private sector companies step up here, Bell and Net Spectrum. And we work with both those companies, and they're going to do a good job as well. So you need everybody to come together, government, private sector, to make these happen. So we're really excited that our project is going to help Killarney. And we'd like to thank Minister Monsef and the Liberal Government of Canada for really recognizing that rural broadband is not just a nice to have, and it's a necessity now. And because of COVID, it's got that much greater of a necessity. We've changed the way we live and the way we work, and we need this broadband. So we'd like to thank the Liberal government for recognizing that, creating this universal broadband fund and stepping up to the plate with our investments to match those investments to make these projects possible. Again, I'd like to thank MP Sadri. Thanks, Mark. Mark and I know each other. We've gone back a long time in this industry, and he's always supported Vianet. And from a Vianet perspective, on behalf of our company and our ownership, we thank you for continued support of us and our project. I'd like to thank Paul Lefebvre. Paul, you're our MP, and you know we're a Sudbury company, and you've always supported us. We'd like to thank you for that support as well. We'd also like to thank Mayor Nancy Wirtz and the rest of the council down in Killarney for supporting this project. We have been delivering service in Killarney for a couple of years now, but it's not the service we want to deliver, and it's not the service the people need. So this project is going to allow us to increase the backbone into Killarney to deliver that 50-10 that the CRTC is looking for. And it's going to be a quality service. You know, equipment's got better over the years. We're putting the latest technology in, and we'll keep growing that. So allowing us to build a taller tower in Killarney and bringing that dedicated gigabit backbone in is going to help the residents. And really, that's why we're all here. We're all here to give the people, and they're the big benefiting factor of this, the people themselves are going to have access to better quality internet. And again, I've heard it from everybody. It is so necessary now. It's not a nice to have anymore. You just can't live without it. The way we're doing business, the way we're here today virtually. I'm old school. I love being in person, and I love talking with everybody in person. And I know most of the people here, and shout out to Susan, your advocacy for Northern Ontario broadband, thumbs up. And I like being in person, but we can't right now. And I think this is a way of the future. We're going to be doing this. Kids are going to do it in school. Medical, you're going to go this way. And for Killarney, you know, it is a 65, 70 kilometer ride out to the highway. And in the wintertime, that can be treacherous. So to have better broadband, to be able to live life and be there and operate through the internet is so important. So we're really excited. And as they said, this is rapid response. Again, thanks to the federal government. To announce a program in November and to have things up and running by the following November, unheard of. And I've been doing this for many decades as well. So hats off to you guys for being able to do this. It truly is remarkable. And we're excited to get going. We're ready to get going, and we're excited to work with the town of Killarney and deliver better internet. So thank you for having us here today. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Brian. We're going to open up for some questions by our media guests. If you could use the raise hand function, our moderator will unmute your mic and just let us know who the question is directed to. Let's switch my view here. If there are any questions. We've got one from Radio Canada. Go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, Zachary Roussier de chez Radio-Canada. Merci pour cette annonce-là aujourd'hui. Vous avez répondu à plusieurs de mes questions là, dans les dernières minutes, donc je vais quand même en tenter une un peu plus large. Donc, je prends connaissance évidemment de l'engagement fédéral de connecter 98% du pays d'ici 2026. Le gouvernement provincial travaille dans le même sens. On l'a appris dans le dernier budget pour 2025. Bon, on imagine que ça passe notamment par des infrastructures comme la fibre optique. Maintenant, on remarque qu'il y a, par exemple, Starlink et l'Internet satellite de SpaceX, en fait, qui commence ses essais dans le nord de l'Ontario. Ce genre de nouvelles technologies-là, c'est une tendance croissante ici et en Europe. Et là, je me demandais, est-ce qu'il y a le risque d'investir dans des infrastructures dans les prochaines années qui pourraient être désuètes avec l'arrivée de ce genre de nouvelles technologies-là? Est-ce que c'est dans notre champ de vision du côté du gouvernement?
Matthew, je peux prendre la question?
Yeah, who was that? Was that for someone specific, or if Mark, you want to answer?
Okay, oui, I could take the answer. Je vais la répondre en français, puis ensuite, je peux peut-être faire quelques commentaires en anglais après. Alors, merci beaucoup, Zachary, pour la question. Évidemment, les investissements qui sont faits. Nous avons la bande passante, en anglais le backhaul, le fibre optique qui rentre en jeu. Nous avons des tours. Alors, le nord de l'Ontario, des parties du Canada avec des lacs, les arbres, les roches. Alors, il y a beaucoup de difficultés, puis le terrain qui alors, les investissements que nous faisons présentement aujourd'hui. La technologie est toujours en évolution. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, on regarde à faire le 50-10. Alors, les investissements qu'on fait aussi, on regarde quand même à long terme. Lorsqu'on parle des investissements qui se produisent aujourd'hui, alors c'est vraiment important aussi, vous mentionnez Starlink, tout le reste, mais Starlink, lorsqu'on regarde la qualité, on regarde les investissements à long terme, les gens regardent un pourvoyeur de qualité avec du service local. Alors, les gens qui m'appellent présentement au bureau, qui communiquent avec nous, ils ne regardent pas nécessairement tout le côté technologie Starlink parce qu'il y a plusieurs facteurs qui rentrent en jeu ici. Alors, les gens regardent à la qualité de l'Internet avec des pourvoyeurs du Canada ici. Alors, c'est ça qui est important lorsqu'on regarde au niveau des investissements qui se font. Alors, on a quand même plusieurs années avec les investissements qui se font produire aujourd'hui. Nous avons besoin. Nous ne savons pas dans 5-10 ans d'histoire les investissements. Puis c'est pour ça que dans l'industrie de télécommunications, il y a toujours le risque. Il faut toujours investir dans la haute vitesse, investir dans le passé, c'était le voice over IP, il y avait le fibre optique, alors il y avait tout le reste. Alors les compagnies privées savent qu'il y a toujours un risque à long terme, mais ils regardent quand même le court terme. So when we look at companies like Starlink, it's really important to note that one is these investments are providing funding to local organizations, Canadian companies that are on the ground that provide services to the local areas. And people want to be able to provide, because internet is still complex when you look at customer service, technical support, having people in the community to provide support. That is so important to have local companies providing that customer support to a local business, to a local home, because there's more and more bandwidth needed. private sector companies realize there's changes in the telecom industry. Brian alluded, we've been close to 20 years in the industry. There's been a lot of changes over the last 20 years, and there will be more changes moving forward, there's no doubt. But the investments that are happening today, the need is to get people connected with 5010 today. And companies like Starlink, they're still a ways ahead, and people want to have that local provider, that Canadian provider that is on the ground, providing them with support. So I wouldn't worry about the investments. The investments are here for a long term. And when we look at Northern Ontario with the trees, the rocks, and you need fiber, you need microwave, you need towers, you can't have one service that will fit all. It's not going to happen. And that's why the investments here in companies that we're making today will benefit not only Northern Ontario, but all of Canada for years to come.
Merci beaucoup.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, wait, question from Mike Lee from the Nugget. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I may have just missed it, but I guess how much funding is being provided today?
So just over $2 million.
And if I heard it correctly, this funding will go towards projects to help connect more than 1,200 or 2,100 households. Is that what it was?
1,200 households.
1,200 households, perfect. And maybe just on that point, I know something that Ms. Church, I think, mentioned to a colleague of mine a few months ago is that that's kind of one of the big problems as far as trying to connect households in more rural communities is because of they're generally more spread out, and it just costs a lot of money to connect what are, generally speaking, fewer households compared to in cities. So I'm just wondering, perhaps for people who may not understand that, I wonder if maybe someone could maybe touch on that, and I guess the importance of this funding as far as trying to help people in rural communities get connected, given the cost.
Yeah, Brian, if you want to take that, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been doing this for many, many years. And when funding first started for rural broadband, the amount of funding was very, very low. And so what got built was really just the low-hanging fruit of rural Canada got built by companies because the funding was so low. And we had that lull in really nothing happened for a few years because the funding had to increase to get to these people. And there was no business plan for a private sector to do it on their own. And as Mark alluded to earlier, different technologies, and you need all the technologies to make things happen. And ExploreNet started. That was the first satellite. And at the beginning of ExploreNet, it was quite good. It solved a lot of problems early. But the problems that they solved also created problems because so many people had to rely on it. It became a congested network. And there's only so much technology or bandwidth they could pull out of that. And now it doesn't work as well. So we had that little gap, and the governments realized that the amount of funding on a per household basis actually had to increase. And I've seen projects where it's up to 10,000 in very, very remote areas, and that's the only way to do it. So we've noticed that increase to the point where a private sector company could say, hey, if you're up in this, $4,000 to $5,000 now I can go get those people that are, 400 or 500 meters apart. And when you're building these networks, they're very expensive, but it made it viable for a private company to sit down, and the government recognized and listened to us and came to the table with the amount of funding required. So hopefully that answers your question. And again, all technologies are good technologies. We need them all. We need fiber, we need wireless, we need satellite, we need everything to solve the problem. There isn't one that's going to do it all. It'd be great if we could put fiber to everybody's house, but we have to be realistic that that cost is in the billions and billions of dollars that we just can't do right now. So we need all these technologies. So I hope that answered your question, and thank you.
Any follow-up from Mike, or are you good?
Yeah, I do have one other follow-up, and
Sure.
I don't want to hog all the questions, but specifically for the project in East Ferris, I wouldn't mind maybe getting a few more details on that, if someone is able to talk about that. Just what I guess how much funding will go for that particular project, what the technology will look like, and how many households are expected to be connected, and when. I guess. So a lot of questions packed.
Sure, and just so everyone knows, there is going to be a news release following this announcement that all media will get with some of those details. But Pauline, if you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, so hello, Michael, how are you? And so certainly for, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, thank you.
So basically in East Ferris, we're looking at about homes that are spread over 7 country roads. So it's a lot of our township in the municipality in the rural area. And it's about 240 homes that are going to be using the fiber last mile technology, but there's also going to be some wireless backbone technology. So it's expected that it might as well assist other homes in that larger, broader area. And so the final numbers, I will leave it to our representatives from the federal government to provide those numbers. But certainly we have the funds that are being allocated today to do that work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Matthew, I just wanted to add to, I'll let the mayors talk a bit about their municipalities and how specific that is to them. But I wanted to go back to the original question that, and then Brian answered really well when we look at it. And I'll give you an example. When we took government in 2015, the Connect Canadians project, funding was very low and funded projects like 5 megs and 1 for those, 5 and 1, which in 2 years it was obsolete, or 6 months. And the level of funding was like 50% of a project. And so what our government has done is we've increased it to 75, 90% for Indigenous communities because they're farther out to reach. And when you're looking at the investments needed, so we provided a lot more funding to make sure that we look at now a 50-10 when you're looking at bandwidth, so that to make sure that this is not only decent speeds, very good speeds, but it's to the future. And that Band-Aid solution from previous governments of just giving a bit of money, pockets here and there, didn't work because the technology became obsolete within a year or two. And now this level of funding provided to the private sector, and again in Canada we have the private sector that delivers the services, is much needed. So when you look at 90%, 75%, 90% of the Indigenous communities, it's much needed to make sure that investment is there for the long term. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect.
If I could just add to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark. Oh, if I could just add to that as well, is when we talk about investing in technology, we say, well, there's always a better one coming up. And I know people do that with TVs. They do that with, well, let's talk about VCRs. I'm going to get it when the next one comes up. Well, your life goes by and nothing happens. Well, you want to be progressive. You want to look at it and see what the technology is of the day and do the best that you can for the people. If we all sat back 50 years ago or 100 years ago and said, well, telephones, we've got rotary right now, and let's wait for the push buttons before we get phones to every household, we wouldn't have had any phones for years. And we can't just do it that way. What we have to do is look at what is best available at the time and make a judgment call. Is there something going to come up tomorrow? Yes, there is going to be something good come up tomorrow, probably a little bit better than what we have today. That's human nature. We improve on what we have. But if we want to look at stuff progressively and make sure that we keep up with the times, then it's very important that we continue to make these investments. Another one is hydro. Years ago, hydro was something new 100 and some years ago, and we could have contained it to large centers. It would have been a lot cheaper. But just because you don't live in a large center doesn't mean you don't deserve hydro. The same can be true for broadband. It's an essential service, and that's what we've realized now, that broadband is that essential service that we have to bring to all communities, regardless of where they're located. Thank you.
Thanks. And I see that we also have a question from Eric Tashner from CTV.
Thanks, Matt. Greatly appreciate it. Question is for MP Surrey. He said that this is part of the federal government's plan to connect 98% of Canadians by 2026. So are there other areas in Northern Ontario that are not part of this announcement today that the federal government has its eye on in the future that still need a stronger internet connection?
Thanks, Eric, for that question. And that's a really, really important question, because one of the elements that are important here to get the word out is for the companies here are dealing with certain areas all across Northern Ontario. I'll get to some specifics, but it's really important that the mayors, the organizations, council look at determining the gaps in their municipalities, working closely like a Susan Church, working closely with Neonet and Timmins, working closely with Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Center, and the mayors and the municipalities to identify some of those gaps that exist in areas, and then encourage companies like NetSpectrum, Vianet, Bell to expand their services. So the key here that what we've done as a federal government, and you'll see now the Universal Broadband Fund, which was a short-term, this project has to be done within 12 months, funding stream. But also we've launched the Universal Broadband Fund. That's a $1.7 billion. That will have more than one intake, so that it gives the opportunity to companies, municipalities, organizations to plan a bit better. And also it gives the opportunity now, with the flexibility that we have with our federal UBF, Universal Broadband Fund, to encourage the provincial government. And you saw just last week, the provincial government coming out with an announcement. So this is good news that we look at working closely together. And we'll give an example. 2 weeks ago, our Prime Minister and the Premier of Quebec made close to $1 billion announcement for rural Quebec, because they've worked together on this. So this is an opportunity, but first you need leadership. And the federal government has provided that leadership. We have a fund that's significant amount of dollars. That $1.7 billion will leverage about $6 billion when it's done. When we look at private sector, provinces, and the federal government. So the key here is how do we get more of that funding available with the province tied in with the federal government. Now, areas that there's still a lot of areas, and Susan Susan Church from Blue Sky has a breakdown per municipality. And I would encourage listeners and everyone to go to connectnorth.ca to put in your address. Data is important to get to. So when we look at areas, we still have several areas in each of our ridings that are not connected, but that's part of the how do you get proposals to the federal government. And if we don't work together, then you have a small proposal here and there, and there's no coordination. And that's why I like what the Blue Skies and Neonet and Innovation Center in the Soo is doing, is having more of a regional approach than just having one small area. So how do we expand that, more of a regional approach with some of the projects, but we need coordination to do that. And that's why Susan mentioned about FedNorth supporting, but we need probably more to look at getting more coordination with municipalities, the private sector, to make sure that we complete those hard to service areas.
Go ahead, Susan. You had a follow-up there?
Sure, just a quick follow-up. So connectednorth.ca is the website that, again, with support from the federal government, we've been able to establish. And within, I think, about the next 2 weeks, we're launching the third version of Baymap, which is the map Mark was referring to, that shows all of the service that's available on all 508,000 property parcels in Northern Ontario. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to publicly open the update that we've done using the very good mapping now from the federal government through their pseudo households. It used to be hexagon maps. The hexagons are gone. We're all grateful for that. And so I really encourage all of you and your readers and your listeners to go to connectednorth.ca, because it really gives you a very good look at where service is and where service isn't. So in the next couple of weeks, we're updating that, and I just wanted folks to be aware of that. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from our media guests? No, Brian does have something to add though.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Something else that's out there is CIRA.ca has created a mapping where you can do a speed test at your residence. I'd encourage municipal politicians to get that out to the people in their community, because that's how the federal government is going to look at who needs this funding. So the more people in your community that can get on and log the speed or lack thereof speed in your community, it'll give the government's areas that, hell, we got to target this area next because we got a lot of people that don't have broadband there or have very slow broadband. So I encourage people to use CIRA.ca as well. Thank you.
Perfect. And if there are no further questions, I'll get a quick picture of everyone: Nancy, Mark, Maggie, Anthony, Pauline, Susan, Brian, and Paul. Here we go. And one more here. Great. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I think that's it. If there's no further questions, thank you everyone so much for joining us. And we will be releasing the media releases shortly, and this whole event will also be uploaded to our social media channels. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.